I have offended God and mankind because my work did not reach the quality it should have. Those were the last words. Do you know who? Leonardo da Vinci. Don't let it end like this. Tell them I said something. Pancho Villa, the Mexican revolutionary. Tell my mother I died for my country. I thought I did it for the best. Useless. Useless. John Wilkes Booth. They all tried to do something great. Wanted to do something great with their lives. And in the end, they felt like they had failed. And I think within the heart of everyone is a desire, I want to do something great. I want to make a difference. I want something on this planet to be different because I've been here. And so we think of all these great things that people could do. Maybe it's build a business from scratch, from the ground up. Or somebody who overcomes the odds after an automobile accident and is able to walk again. And people said, oh, you wouldn't be able to do that. Or to work long and hard hours to provide a comfortable life for your family. Or to fight cancer 3 times and be victorious. Or to be elected to political office. Or to be born in poverty and work your way out of that and become, the head of a business. We think of all of those great things. Which of those is the greatest? You might expect me to say, well, none of them are. But I'm not going to say that. But you would be partially correct. All of those things can be a part of a great life. But none of them is the greatest. So what then is the greatest thing that we can do with our lives with this limited time we have on this spinning blue marble in space? That was a question that rabbis used to ask. Of all the things God said to us, which one is the greatest? And there would be a lot of debates. And in fact, if you were kind of an ornery person, you would ask that question of somebody to get an argument going. Kind of like the, once saved, always saved debate or speaking in tongues debate. You mentioned that, and all of a sudden you got people going, rah, 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 rah. You know what I mean? So this was that question in that culture. Now, with that as a background, let's jump into this passage in Mark chapter 12, starting in verse 28. One of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating. Noticing that Jesus had given a good answer, he asked them, of all the commandment, which one is most important? He's trying to stir up a little something, right? The most important one, Jesus answered, is this one. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, with all your mind and with all your strength. The second one is this. Love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. And Jesus was quoting from Deuteronomy chapter 6, the passage that Sam read earlier. And as we read that, there's a tendency to say, okay, love God. Supposed to love God. That's the greatest thing, is love God. Supposed to have this warm, ooey gooey affection for God. Is that what that means? What does it really mean that I love God? That I go, what does love for God look like? And that's a good question. Notice what Jesus said. He said it a couple of times. John 14, if you love me, you will obey what I command. In verse 21, whoever has my commands and obeys them is he who loves me. Verse 23, if anyone loves me, he will obey my teaching. And then John, who recorded those, in 1 John 5:3, summed it up with this. This is love for God, to obey his commands, and his commands are not burdensome. So loving God is obeying God. Loving God is obeying God. Get it? I say get it, you say got it, and then I say good. All right? Get it? Good. Loving God is obeying God. So, that's what we're going to look. What does that look like? And so we're going to flesh that out this week and next week. Obey God with all. Obey God with all your. This is not 43%, 75%, 100% during the week, but then on weekends you get some time off. Obey God with all your, it said with all your heart in that passage, but it's really passion. That's the idea. Obey God with all of your passion. So, what are you passionate about? What are you passionate about? What are the things that make you excited? What are the things that cause you to stay up late at night? What are the things that cause you to get up early and work on because it's something you really care about? For some of you, it might be sports. You're passionate about sports. Others, politics. Or maybe gardening. And there's a tendency for you to think, well, the pastor's going to shoot all three of those things down. They're terrible things. He's not going to do that. Not that those things are bad. What Jesus is saying is that you're supposed to be most passionate about obeying God. I don't know. There's a term that I'm going to use. I don't know if most of you know this term, but how many of you know what a bracket is? Like a tournament, it has a bracket. Have any of you heard of a bracket? So imagine all the passions in your life, you put them in a bracket. Let's say there's 8 things. That works out well. You have 8 things you're passionate about in your life. And it was, this one and this one and this one and this one. And you run a tournament with the passions in your life. What Jesus is saying is that loving God, obeying God, is supposed to win the bracket. It's okay to have all those other passions. We're not supposed to get rid of all those other passions. In fact, they're going to help in that process. Like sports, somebody who's passionate about sports, that's a way to develop relationships with other people. It's a platform as an athlete to share about Jesus. And it's a way to provide income for your other passions. Politics. We tend to have a bad view of politicians. But there is injustice all over the place. When have we needed a good follower of Jesus to stand up for integrity and do the right thing in political office? We need that, right? So that's okay to be passionate about politics. Gardening. What's the first job? What was the first job? Gardening. Garden of Eden. Taking care of the garden. That was the first job. And gardening is a great thing. Especially, they say, if people who work with their brain relax with their hands. And so, out in the dirt, out in nature, God's creation, learning to be dependent on someone beyond themselves to make things grow, seeing new life, that's a great passion. There's nothing wrong with that passion. But it cannot be the primary passion. God is not to be the only passion, but the one passion that wins the tournament. Your primary passion should eclipse all other passions. Your primary passion of obeying God should eclipse all other passions. We are designed to obey God passionately. All your passions then should feed your primary passion. All the other passions in your life should feed into that and should help that passion develop speed and heat in your life. Your other passions should stoke that fire. If your other passions are throwing water on that primary passion, there's something wrong. You know, the children of Israel had this struggle throughout the whole Old Testament. God actually went so far to say, you guys are committing adultery with other gods. I told you, your primary passion is to be obeying me, right? But then you go obey Baal and Shemosh and all these other gods. It's like you're committing adultery. And that's true. We have to make loving God our primary passion. You can't have an affair and say that your spouse is your primary passion. God says you can't have any other passion in your life that's greater than obeying me. So that's what it means to love God with all of your heart. And he goes on, and love him with all of your soul. Your soul is the permanent center of your life. Love God with the permanent center of your life. So, how long do you think I'm going to have this body? How many more years? 30? Do I hear anybody want to go 40? Please? Sold. I think at this point that would be great, but I don't know. I do have a walker already, so I'm ready to go. But I'm not going to have this body for as long as I've been here. I'm over halfway. You know what they say? When you're over the hill, you pick up speed. So this should be fun. But how long am I going to have my soul? Forever. Forever. Body's temporary. Soul is forever. It's permanent. The soul is the center of your life. Everything else in your life revolves, spins around your soul. It's like an axis. The earth has an axis. It tilts at 23.5 degrees. And this planet spins around that axis. And the idea of your soul is that everything else in your life rotates around that, spins around that. That's the center. So the question is, when we think about the soul, upon what does your life revolve? What is the most important thing? What's the center of your life? And there's a lot of things we could experiment with. Like, I could live my life like this. I could live it like this. I could live it like this. But the problem is that we don't have the time, the money, the opportunity, or the extravagant polygamous lifestyle to pursue every desire under the sun. But we can look and learn from somebody who did. And to do that, we're going to go to Ecclesiastes. This is Solomon. Listen to his resume. I also tried to find meaning by building huge homes for myself and by planting beautiful vineyards. I made gardens and parks, filling them with all kinds of fruit trees. I built reservoirs to collect water to irrigate my many flourishing groves. I bought slaves, both men and women, and others were born to me into my household. I also owned large herds and flocks, more than any kings who had lived in Jerusalem before me. I collected great sums of silver and gold, the treasure of many kings and provinces. I hired wonderful singers, both men and women, and I had many beautiful concubines. I had everything a man could desire. Wow. He goes on, so I became greater than all who had ever lived in Jerusalem before me. And my wisdom never failed me. Anything I wanted, I would take. I denied myself no pleasure. That is an incredible statement. He's sitting around and he's looking, and there's a beautiful woman who's walking down the street, and he would say, get her for me. She's going to be my wife or my concubine. Anyone he wanted, he had. I even found great pleasure in hard work, a reward for my labors. But as I looked at everything I had worked for so hard to accomplish, it was all so, what? Meaningless. Like chasing the wind. There was nothing really worthwhile anywhere. He came to the end of that pursuit where he went after everything he desired, and he got to the end of that road and he said, it's like chasing the wind. No matter how much you chase the wind, there's more wind to be chased, and you never get to the end, and you never accomplish anything. That's what he's saying. It's empty. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines. But he was missing something. The temporary access appeals to the flesh. That was Solomon's life. He went after the temporary pleasures of this life in a way that none of us could do legally. An unimaginable, extravagant lifestyle. And it wasn't enough. Notice what it says in Ecclesiastes 3:11. Yet God has made everything beautiful for its own time. He has planted what? Eternity. God has planted eternity in the human heart, but even so, people cannot see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to end. God planted eternity. God put eternity in our hearts. And so in our hearts, there's an ache for something eternal. There is this desire in us. There is this discontent, this frustration, this thing that just isn't right. You ever felt it? And we're going to feel that until we get to heaven. There's something in our soul that longs for eternity. And so we want to make the best of this life, but we know we're longing for heaven. There's something that when we get to our eternal reward, we can say from the center of our souls, home. And that need will be met. God planted that eternal longing in our heart. We're made with that eternal hole in us. And we have that eternal hole in us. And we try to stuff temporary stuff in there. And that's what Solomon did. More women, more sex, more money, more power. And he's jamming all that stuff into that hole, and none of it fills it. And we do the same exact thing. Maybe if I had that job, maybe if I was married to that person, maybe if I went to that school, maybe if I did that, then finally that thing would be met. God has planted eternity in our hearts, and nothing else will fill it. So what did Solomon learn? Ecclesiastes 7:2. Better to spend your time at funerals than at parties. After all, everyone dies. What's his point? All temporary stuff, all temporary pleasures come to an end, and then you're just like everybody else. After all, everyone dies, so the living, that's you and me, should take this to heart. We should take this to heart. Everything you run after, everything you try to get, Solomon said, end up back at the same place. He was the wealthiest, the wisest man at that time. And he had this thought, when I die, I'm going to be like one of my slaves that died. There's going to be no difference in the grave. Everything I worked for, everything I did, gone. Solomon tried to fill the eternal with the temporary. He tried to fill the eternal with the temporary. So what did he learn from his extravagant experiment of pleasure? Ecclesiastes 12:13. That's the whole story. Here now is my final conclusion. Fear God and obey his commands, for this is everyone's duty. That's it. Instead of been everywhere, done everything. Here's the bottom line. Fear God and obey him. Fear God and obey him. You see, the eternal access fills the soul. The eternal access. Everything else in your life spins around your focus on God, your obedience of God. Everything else rotates around that. And you orient your life around obeying God. Once upon a time, there was a very wealthy king with 4 wives. He loved the 4th wife the most and adorned her with rich robes and treated her to finest of delicacies. He gave her nothing but the best. He also loved his 3rd wife very much and always showed her off to the neighboring kingdoms. However, he feared that one day she would leave him for another. He loved his 2nd wife. She was his confidant and was always kind and considerate and patient with him. Whenever the king faced a problem, he would confide in her and she would help him find the strength through those difficult times. The king's 1st wife was very loyal and made great contributions in maintaining his wealth and kingdom. However, he did not love his 1st wife. Although she loved him deeply, he hardly took notice of her. And then one day the king was ill, and he knew that he was going to die. And he realized that in spite of all his luxurious lifestyle, that would all come to an end and he would be alone. So he went to his 4th wife and he said, I have loved you the most and endowed you with the finest clothing and showered you with the greatest care. Now that I'm dying, will you follow me and keep me company? No way, replied the 4th wife, and she walked away without another word. The king then asked his 3rd wife, I have loved you all my life, and now that I'm dying, will you follow me and keep me company? No, replied the 3rd wife. Life is too good, and when you die, I'm going to remarry. He said then to his 2nd wife, I have always turned to you for help, and I've always been there for me. When I die, will you follow me and keep me company? I'm sorry, I can't help you out this time, replied the 2nd wife. At the very most, I can only send you to your grave. Then a voice called out, I will leave with you and I'll follow you no matter where you go. And the king looked up and there was his 1st wife. She was so skinny and so gaunt because she suffered from malnutrition and neglect. Greatly grieved, the king said, I should have taken better care of you when I had a chance. In truth, we all have 4 wives. Our 4th wife is our body. No matter how much time and effort we lavish on it, making it look good, it will leave us when we die. Our 3rd wife is our possessions, our status, our wealth. When we die, it will all go to others. Our 2nd wife is our family and friends. No matter how much they have been there for us, the furthest they can stay with us is up to the grave. And our 1st wife is our soul, often neglected in pursuit of wealth, power, and pleasures of the world. Which is your favorite wife? Examine the way that you live. Which according to the way that you live, is your favorite wife? Which do you take care of the best? Which do you love the most? Choose one. Which one will you choose? See, choose wisely, because your soul is the only thing that you can take with you wherever you go. We'll take our souls with us when we go to be with Jesus. So orient it to the eternal. Focus your soul on God. Love God with your soul. Make everything else in your life spin around that focus on God. Your soul is the only thing that you have that you can take with you when your other 3 wives leave you. Here's the bottom line. When you make God your whole life, He fills the hole in your life. When you make God your whole life, He fills the hole. When you fill your life with other stuff, that hole within you gets bigger. I began by talking about famous last words of people you know. There's another man, Louis B. Mayer. I don't know if you know that name. You've heard of MGM. He's the second M of MGM. His last words, it wasn't worth it. Isn't that sad? It wasn't worth it. Would you stand with me? Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. With every head bowed, every eye closed, I'm just going to ask you a question this morning. How many of you will say this morning, I will be adjusting something in my life. I want to take care of that 4th wife. I want to take care of my soul, and I'm going to be making changes in my life. Just slip your hand up so I can pray for you. Okay. I see some hands. Yes? Yes? Anyone else? Okay. Yes. Okay. Let's pray together. Father, thank you. We have disappointed you. I have disappointed you over and over again. And yet, in grace, in mercy, you stay faithful to us when we haven't been faithful to you. And so, Father, forgive us. Give us wisdom to live our lives oriented to your axis, oriented to focusing on obeying you in every single area of our lives, so that you can use us to make a difference in our community, just like Sam and Karen shared. Lord, we want to be like that. We want to love people in such a way that they learn to trust you. Father, thank you for what you're doing. You are at work in our lives, and we can see it. Help us to orient our life on you so that you can do that more and more and more. Thank you for what you're going to do in Jesus' name. Amen.